All right. We're back. Nobody here. Good, let's get started then. Top secret debate prep stream, part 2. We'll pick up where we left off watching Tom Norman on David Rams.
Make that much difference, to be totally honest with you. People say that, but I'm just one person of a billion. What difference will I make? The answer is, if you look at it specifically that way, probably not much. But the point is that it's many drops make an ocean, right? The point is, if we all get on board, that's where things start to shift. And that's kind of the point of why to change. It's not just a principle. There's an outcome here that if enough people do it, we get on board, we change the world. That's how change has always happened, right? It's not just one person changing that changes the world, unless you're the bloody president and you can, bring it into law or something. Whereas, and this is where I was going to flip this on its head, just to see what...
Even then, I can't resist making this point. Excuse me. I can't resist making this point. People imagine that the president or the prime minister or CEOs or whatever have some sort of unilateral power to turn off the factory farm button if only they wanted to. But actually they don't, right? Because they're beholden to what everybody else wants to happen in different ways. If you're a politician that is relying on people to vote for you, or if you're, pardon me, running a company that is relying on customers to shop at your supermarket, for example, then you're pretty much beholden to what those people want. Hey, Samuel. We've kept it kind of intentionally broad. The prop that we've agreed on to debate is Farm Kind's Forget Veganuary campaign is defensible, kind of broadly. And then, there's a few different parts of that we could go into. So, yeah. And Patrick was also quite keen to make sure that we had in there specified that the campaign pays influencers to eat animal products, as we've seen earlier on. So yeah, that's the prop.
What you think, right?
But yeah, it's kind of deliberately quite broad so that we can explore it a bit.
Right. I would position to you that actually, if we're going to go versus, which I don't agree with, by the way, I don't think there should be a one or the other here, but if we're going to go one or the other, surely the upper limit actually comes with money, because if people continue to consume the same way they consume, that means the same amount of animals bred into captivity. The only difference changes with when money's brought in is how they're treated. And you can only...
Well, there is an upper limit to this strategy overall. As I said in my video on this topic, there will come a point where it is no longer the case that you can offset the average amount of meat eaten with modest donations if the movement's using resources rationally and spending on the most effective things first, which is a pretty big if, to be fair. Then, if you double the budget of the movement, that extra 300 million is going to have more impact than if you were to triple it and get another 300 million. So, and then I suppose there is an upper limit. And yes, at some point, people do need to eat less animals. And if everyone thinks that they can just offset rather than actually changing their diet, then it's almost self-exploding, it's self-defeating. It will no longer be the case. If everyone thought that it was the case, it would no longer be the case. Or rather, I guess the amount needed to donate to offset would get higher and higher and higher. Right now, it's a very low amount because the animal movement has a very low budget. But as that budget gets higher, the cost of offsetting one's own meat consumption would also get higher. So in that sense, there's an upper limit. And then, of course, there's also an upper limit of just like how much money people have to donate. So there is kind of an upper limit on an individual level as well. But even then, it's a much, much higher upper limit in terms of animals helped than changing your diet alone.
Only improve that to it. There's a very firm ceiling there to what you can do. I mean, you can end up with a situation where every animal gets a VR headset or something and thinks they're in a beach. Or okay, but that starts to get ridiculous, right? And if you want to, how many billions of dollars or whatever trillions would that cost, right? So you can get ridiculous with it, but ultimately, the only way to actually change the system is if people stop paying into it for these products. And so, yeah, I would flip it on its head. I would argue that the actual limit, the upper limit, is actually with donations, not with diet change. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think this is where it comes back to this point I made earlier about like where are we on the overall journey. I think again that's really critical. And as I say, I think reasonable people can disagree with this. And actually, just like as a really quick side point, I am very much in favor of like lots of different people taking different strategies and approaching things differently, because I think fundamentally none of us know. Like, I'm telling you what I think my best guess is about where we are and how long things will take, but I am very aware that I could definitely be wrong, and I'm very glad that other people have more optimistic or more kind of, if you like, aggressive in the sense of like trying to move quickly, like ideas about how things are and how things can change. Because like I would love it if they were right and I was wrong, and things are going to change faster than I think they will as well. And I think like this kind of proliferation of approaches, so we're trying lots of different things, seeing what works, given how uncertain the environment is just like that's how we should be doing things. Because though my best guess is that we're in like a fairly early in this journey, and I would point to some of the evidence I've mentioned already around like the pretty flat numbers of like vegans and vegetarians over the last 15 years, for example. The fact that the consumption of meat over globally, it continues to rise. The fact that even in the United States, for example, what we're seeing is like people are eating fewer cows but more chickens, so more animals are being farmed, and those animals are having worse lives. Like ultimately, at the moment, things are, if you look in the wide aggregate, things are getting worse, not better. And so because of all these things, I think we're at a position where we're like quite early in our journey and quite early in the process. And this is where making this is why I think money and capacity is like so important. So what we need to be doing, I think, as a movement is really focusing on capacity building, and that means having more people and having more money and having more people who are doing something and feel like they are part of the solution. And what I think is that like if the barrier to being part of the solution is you have to like change your diet, many people, as I've said, are going to just think that that's too high a cost for them right now, but they are prepared to do something like, you know, that or most.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of contingent on where or like how long you think the fight is going to be. You know, the people who think that we can bring the whole thing to an end quite soon will just find stuff like this kind of time wasting or unnecessarily divisive or something like that. But if you're thinking about it like, okay, we'll probably still have factory farms in 50 years' time, then it starts to make more sense to think, right, we need to build up our resources, we need to build up our capacity. So yeah, it's kind of, as you're saying, contingent on how long you think the fight's going to go on for. I agree that things are getting worse on aggregate. Things are going, some things are going in the right direction in high-income countries, but you know, the number of animals farmed globally is going up each year, and especially small animals, as he says. So that's all bad news, and that is certainly an indication that the building capacity is wise, because we probably are in for a long fight. There's techno-optimism to be had about cultivated meat and so on, although that's not a guaranteed clear sailing, right? But yeah, and of course, Good Food Institute is one of the charities that FarmKind donations go to, which develops all markets for alternative proteins and the research for alternative proteins and so on. But yeah,
most people donate some money to charities. Many people are prepared to like give some money a month, and then they can feel like they're part of the solution, and like they're on our team now. And we're not saying to them like you have to like you know you have to go vegan to be on our team. They're saying as long as you're doing something to help animals, you're on our team. And I think that's actually really powerful and really helpful, because it allows us to like have more capacity, have more power as a movement, because we've got more people involved, we've got more people doing things, we've got more resources to.
Now, of course, David Rams is going to say you don't necessarily want to give people the feeling that they're part of the solution if they're still very much part of the problem. I'm not sure about this one. It is. Does it build? We were talking earlier about, does it build the likelihood that people would take other pro-animal actions like going vegan afterwards? And I think there's some chance that it could. Although it being framed as moral licensing as it is, it's kind of yeah, it could be tricky to make that case. I like what he said about the diversity of strategies. We could think about animal agriculture or factory farming, let's say, being under pressure from a bunch of different angles. I've done some more sort of sophisticated flowcharts of this sort of thing and done some videos on that. Actually, maybe I'll just copy one of those ultimately. Falling demand for animal products. Increasing costs of factory farming. And then you can have sort of smaller things going into these. Laws. So this is like the welfarist angle. Well, let's put pressure on factory farming. And then down here we can have veganism. And also sorts of proteins. And all of these things are going to kind of link in. So this is what he's saying with diversity of approaches. And then all of these things can be driven forward by, well, these different orgs that FarmKind gives to, right? This could be THL doing the corporate policy stuff. Synergia, I believe, does a lot of the legal side of the legal campaigns. This is the Good Food Institute that does the alt proteins. And which of them promotes veganism? I know that THL does diet change campaigns, I'm sure, including vegan campaigns. I think that might be the main one. The main one that does actual diet change work. I was looking at this earlier. This is the Veganuary campaign website. This is the Dutch Vegetarian Foundation, which is a very unusually high impact. No, sorry, Danish, not Dutch. My apologies, Danish, which is like an unusually high impact National Vegetarian Society, I guess. They're doing very good things over in Denmark. So maybe they could be listed as, well, they could go here. Laws, regulatory frameworks. And then, of course, So that's the Danish Vegetarian Foundation. And then here we've also got the Shrimp Welfare Policy and Fish Welfare Institute on the corporate policy side. And then we could have even back here FarmKind, right? Or forget Veganuary. Now, this is a little bit different from the context that Tom was speaking about there, because I think he's going on to say, there are other, pardon me, there are other valid approaches outside of FarmKind, right? And that, Veganuary itself is not necessarily a bad thing and this kind of thing, right? Which, obviously we agree with. But also interesting that a lot of the FarmKind charities, well, it does represent a quite good spread of cause areas which are known to put pressure on factory farming. Maybe I'll make this neater before I show it in the debate, but I think it's kind of clear, right? Are there any others working on diet change, actually? That's what I was looking at. Food Institute's Alternative Proteins, Humane League, Synergy, I'm sure do diet change stuff as well. It's interesting, it's not necessarily a main thing of what any of these very high impact organizations do. Well, as I said earlier, I think Veganuary probably is one of the more impactful diet change organizations.
To do these things. And at the moment, because of where we are, I think strategies like getting hens out of cages are really, really important, because this is suffering right now, massive suffering for animals, that we can help those animals by getting them out of cages. So if you look, for example, in the UK, because of the work of a number of really amazing organizations, we've gone from about 50% of hens living in cages in about sort of 10 years ago. Now 80% of hens are cage free. And in the UK government's latest animal welfare strategy, they've committed to a ban on colony cages altogether in the UK, which is amazing. And also looking at farrowing crates and all these kinds of things as well. And this isn't going to mean that those animals have.
I want to say they've committed to consulting on an outright ban. I could be wrong about that. Maybe that's for farrowing crates. The UK animal welfare strategy was pretty dope, though. In any case, fair play to them.
Great lives, and they're living like the humans in WALL-E, where everything is done for them and stuff like that. But it is going to mean that they have much better lives than they otherwise would have, and that's a really big difference and a really big positive improvement. That's not where we should stop. It's not where anybody wants us to stop, but it is on the journey. And right now, I think that's where we should be deploying a lot of our money, not all of it, but a lot of it, into these kinds of things where we're making the lives of animals meaningfully better. But once we succeed at these things, we can move on to more ambitious and other things. And eventually, hopefully, what we'll be doing is really focusing our resources and our time in alternatives to farmed animals. I think probably what we'll need to do in order to really end factory farming is have viable alternatives that taste the same, that are as available or as cost effective for people to buy as the meat that they're used to. I don't think probably we're going to persuade everybody to give up meat and eat tofu, much as I think tofu is amazing and really tasty. I think many people sadly disagree with me about that. So I think that's probably I think my theory of change, if you like, is like that, right? So
yeah,
we need to help animals right now. Incidentally, most of the reason that the animals welfare, the reason that animals are treated like shit in factory farms is because it's cheap to do it. When we improve their welfare by making sure that Tesco's refuses to buy caged hens, caged eggs, for example, or getting legal changes, it is increasing the costs. basic economics 101 suggests that this is
Mm.
like having an impact on the number of people who are buying it and therefore the number of animals that are farmed as well. But I think we need to do that for the
He's been watching Chris Bryant.
animals that are going to be farmed inevitably. And I think we also need to be looking at like these solutions. I'm glad that people disagree with me and are doing vegan advocacy campaigns, because I might be wrong about that.
Yeah.
But I think this is like probably how this will be solved. And I think that there's like I'm able to point to some historical evidence to support that view.
Yeah. I mean, look, everything I think your pictures of Farm Kind, which is what this was as well, and then earlier on, I've spent some time in the welfare kind of reform world. As you might know, I'm friends with Tobias Leinart, who's been on the channel. And my followers, people who watch the videos, read the Substack, will know that I'm open-minded to different strategies. And like I said earlier on, tools in the toolbox. The reason that you're here though is not because I personally take issue. I mean, some of my subscribers will for sure, but I wasn't planning to argue with you about that. Like, is welfare reform the best thing, or is vegan advocacy the best thing? The thing that I want to get to the bottom of, and the reason I asked that question just then is because whether you like it or not, you've pitted yourself against veganuary more so, but against veganism. And I know it might not feel that way from you because you've got your strategy and you've got what you believe, which is not that, but publicly it is exactly what it looks like and feels like. And so I'm sort of not forced, but I'm choosing in a way to try and set the record straight on some of those things, and have some verses, like, okay, your way versus the vegan way. It's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be either way. And this is the other kind of thing a lot of people said, it doesn't have to be either way, but that's the way your campaign has decided to go ahead and push it, that it's forget veganuary. It's literally called forget veganuary. It's our way.
This is so interesting because if this bet pays off in a big way, I think we'll have no choice but to view the team at FarmKind as like real moral entrepreneurs, and I don't know if hero is too strong a word. Like if it goes as Tom is thinking that it will go, and expands the budget significantly. Well, again, I don't know what their particular targets are for fundraising with this campaign, but I think the theory of change is correct in the sense that, if this is a real-time strategy game, we're in the period where you're collecting resources, not the period where you're going to battle. In many ways, although there are battles, and we're winning many of them, even with comparatively fewer resources. But I think that generating resources for the movement, I think, is potentially extremely high value, high leverage activity. It's a bit, and they've taken a risk in doing this. They have.
But don't do veganuary, right?
Yeah, can I speak to that specific?
Yeah, go for it.
Because I think this is a really important thing. So, do I like? So I agree. I'm not. I know what I think your questions are good. They're useful. Questions, and I know that you're asking useful, good questions, right? The point about why couldn't we just say like, why don't you do either one, or like it doesn't have to be an either or, why don't you do both these things? I think this is a fair point, because like obviously being vegan is a good thing, like a morally good thing, and it does have some impact, especially if like lots of people do it. It will have some impact on, if everybody who was vegan today gave it up, I would expect that like that would cause more animals to be farmed, right? Which would be a bad thing. The reason that the specific reason that we're saying like, why don't you do this instead, is because number one, we think that, as I say, like the people who we're targeting, we don't think that they were going to go vegan otherwise, right? But number two, our experience so far has been that like often when we start talking about factory farming, people the script in people's minds is that, right, you started talking about this, so now you're going to ask me to change my diet, and so they've already stopped listening to us, and they've already stopped like paying attention. And like we used to do videos where we'd get comments like, oh, I'm not going to go vegan, or like, I love bacon too much, when we had nothing in our video was talking about like diet change at all, and sometimes explicitly not talking about it, and you'd still get these comments. And so what we think is essentially, in order to reach, there's a lot of people out there to reach, we have to like make it very clear that we're not asking them to change their diet, and we're not saying to do that. The structure of our campaign is trying to go, okay, how can we do that in a way that like where the media will like pay attention, will amplify that message, and that's really why we don't think, I think that if we had said we can do both, probably lots of people wouldn't have heard what we were actually saying. They'd have heard that as a pro-vegan message, which they would have then pushed back against, because they just really don't want to hear that. And also, like, probably, let's be honest, like I and my partner would tell you that like I am one for ranting about how like dumb I think the media is often, and just like this is one of my big bugbears, is that like you can't have like reasonable, sensible conversations in the media. But I think that had we put out a really nuanced kind of like message, probably just like no one would have listened at all. And while I think there are definite risks with the approach we've taken, and we could be wrong, like it could be that this was just not a good idea, like I'm open to that. What we felt was those risks were relatively minor, because we're trying to speak to people who already really don't like the idea of being vegan. And also just like media stories don't tend to stick in the consciousness for very long. I imagine most of the people will just have forgotten about what we've done. Like, I think the most likely outcome of what we're trying to achieve here is that like in a month or two's time, basically everybody will have forgotten about it, right? It will have achieved not very much at all. Like, the positive version of that is that we do manage to persuade a lot of people to give money, and we make a big difference. But like, it's very possible it's just like goes into the ether, and like nobody really listens. So I think the risks are fairly low. I think the risks are actually like fairly low. The upside is like really quite positive, which is that
there's an interesting, I lost the track of that a little bit there, but what he thinks the risks are fairly low.
It's just like goes into the ether, and like nobody really what we're trying to achieve here is that like in a month or two's time, basically everybody will have forgotten about it, right? It will have achieved not very much at all.
Yeah, that's I did think that certainly in terms of the media cycle, I mean, there's a ton, you know, if you look historically for anti-vegan articles, there's a ton of them that you can come across. Adding one more to the pile in the long term, it probably isn't doing that much. You know, there's always some sort of round of anti-vegan headlines. Is this the one that like broke Veganuary? I don't know. Yeah, in a couple of months people have forgot. I think that's, you know, for the general public, I think that's true. Maybe in the animal movement, well, we'll see. I guess in the long run, if I'm right and the proof's in the pudding, then we'll see.
Like, the positive version of that is that we do manage to persuade a lot of people to give money, and we make a big difference. But like, it's very possible it's just like goes into the ether, and like nobody really listens. So I think the risks are fairly low. I think the risks are actually like fairly low. The upside is like really quite positive, which is that we could bring in a lot more money for a lot of really great organizations that are supporting, you know, making animals' lives better. To be clear, like, none of the money raised through this campaign or through any of our other campaigns goes to like FarmKind. We pass on all the money that we raise to the charities that we recommend. And yeah, like that's so I think while yeah, I guess well, I think there is some those are
Has anyone actually seen any of the content from the influencers? I think today was the day that they're doing the eating challenges for JJ.iron and these other people who are taking part. Has anyone seen any of that around? We can have a look. We can have a look on Instagram, I guess.
valid critiques. There's a valid risks. I think those risks in reality are like quite low, and we think that like the prize here is to help a lot of animals.
Yeah, so it's. I said to put this in a more uncharitable way than we've been quite charitable so far, but just make one exception if you don't mind. And I'm asking for permission, but it feels a little bit like, I know that you said the risks are low, but I'll explain why I don't entirely agree with that now. It does feel like Veganuary was sort of sacrificed at the altar of raising money, right? For charity, but still sacrificed at the altar of donations. And the reason I say that is because, yeah, maybe the risks are lower than I perceive them. It doesn't change that the Veganuary, the organization, was sacrificed for a goal of another organization. And the main risk I see here is that I saw Aidan, Aidan saying that he hopes to get this on Piers Morgan, get someone on Piers Morgan to debate this. If it gets to that point, I mean, GB News is already pretty big. I mean, there are clips from Piers Morgan that were 4 or 5 years ago still circulate, and they are anti-vegan clips. I still get people quoting Piers Morgan almost word for word when they argue against veganism with me on a daily basis, right? So the idea that this would just be out and not in the zeitgeist anymore, I think, yeah, sure, if it sticks at this sort of national level, but if it blows up to Piers Morgan level, this will be around for a long time. People would use this as an argument against vegans and say, oh, well, these guys, she used to be vegan, she used to even work for Veganuary.
There's kind of this. I mean, that may be true, but well, the first thing is that I'm not sure. I mean, the fact that there are clips from 4 or 5 years ago that are still circulated could be evidence of this being higher impact in the long term, or it could be evidence of this being lower impact in the long term. Because, like I say, this is just one of many, and like it's adding, not much to the overall volume of such content. So that's the first point. That point could kind of cut either way. But the second point, I mean, if it is the case that donating can help more animals than diet change, it would be a good thing for that to maintain and exist and be circulated. And frankly, it would be a good thing if, smug meat eaters would own vegans by donating to effective animal charities, right? So I think I'm reminded of Humane Hancock's video, Veganism Doesn't Actually Matter. I made a video on that. The goal is, it's very easy to think of like getting to 100% veganism, or the vegan world people talk about, right? It's through the frame of veganism. The goal is really eliminating animal suffering, reducing animal suffering, preventing animal suffering, or rights violations, however you want to look at it. So, yeah, if it is the case that we can do that more effectively by donating than by diet change, then I think you would probably want that clip to persist. Again, as long as that continues to be the case, and there is a time limit on this, but I would say probably in 5 years' time, it will still be the case that you can help animals more by donating than by diet change. Hey, Tristan. Hey, Stem. Welcome back. Nice to see you.
I mean, she probably knows more than you. She was a vegan for 30 years. And as far as I understand, by the way, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but she isn't vegan currently. So I someone reached out to me and told me that, someone close to Tony. So, this all being the case, I know.
I don't think that's correct. It sounds like he has a better source than I thought she said on the GB News interview that she is vegan. That said, they're probably wanting to be a bit ambiguous about it for the purpose of the campaign, right? Again, these guys can't really be that forthcoming in saying, no, I am vegan, because the whole point is you're not trying to associate with that for the purposes of targeting this red group. Right, we're Team Purple in Vegan 2.0. but we're outnumbered by the red group. So we got to get their money.
Tony's not saying that publicly, but still, you know, ex-veganuary speaking out against veganuary, speaking out against veganism and vegan ideals, you know, vegan advocacy. I think it's very sticky. I think it could be stickier than you predicted. So this is a major concern. On top of that, it's the, you know, I want to ask.
My commentary on LinkedIn was to say, I hope that people read past the headline of this. Because if they do, I mean, you know, that's looks bad for veganism, or, you know, is bad for animals, I guess, as a headline on expectation. But if people read as far as the donation point, and if they follow through with that, or a significant number of them do, I can easily see how that ends up good for animals in the long run.
Ask you a question. This is if you want to stop and respond to that, you can. Otherwise, I can ask you a question.
I will just really quickly. So specifically, we don't ask anybody who works with FarmKind what their diet is, because our mission is to say that we care that you. What we care about is, are you aligned with our mission, which is to end the suffering of animals in factory farms. Everything else is like up to you. But
to be clear, sorry, just interject. I wasn't suggesting that you should do that, or that everybody who should
I know.
Should be vegan. But I was suggesting that it's specifically your person who is the face. You know, there is the risk that she would answer that question. Like Piers Morgan goes, "Are you a vegan?" No, I'm not. I was for 30 years. Now I'm not. Additionally, working for FarmKind. Additionally, anti-vegan.
This is why I was gonna. So this is why I wanted to specifically. I was just prefacing. She was asked. This was the first question in her GP News interview.
Oh, was it?
To which she said, "So now I know, because I didn't ask before, because I didn't want to ask."
Okay.
But she said she is still a vegan. So I just wanted to briefly correct the record on that. But please do ask your question.
Yeah, no apology if I got that wrong. Yeah, again, this is I suppose it's yeah, hearsay versus the horse's mouth. I should have watched the GB News interview.
Used to be a high-profile backer of veganuary. It has turned her back on the cause and is now involved with animal welfare charity, which encourages people to, you guessed it, eat meat. I'm glad to be joined now by Tony Vernelli.
Again, this is a bit of a. You know, you don't quite have the same headline. Becomes meat campaigner. I mean, that is not even damaging to aim to reduce animal suffering. That might be true to what she said in the quote. That's certainly in the spirit of vegan movement, probably not, but like insisting that veganism is the one and only thing, I guess you could say. Anyway.
Tony, great to see you. So you were a vegan, and you've you now munching steaks again? What happened?
No, my diet hasn't changed since
Are you still vegan? Got it.
And we're not encouraging people to take up meat eating. We're encouraging them to do something about the meat they're already eating.
So the question
Yeah, so she said, my diet hasn't changed. Again, I think they're probably being a little coy. The whole campaign is to not aim at vegans, so I think they're probably being a little bit coy about... She doesn't necessarily want the clip of her saying, I am vegan, right, for this purpose. But she said, my diet hasn't changed. No, my diet hasn't changed. So I think that implies that she has stayed vegan. Again, they don't necessarily want to shout about that with the campaign. That puts them in a little bit of a difficult position, but... Yeah, good, fair correction by Tom.
I would ask then is flipping the script, like flipping this back on yourself. I mean, you said it was worth the risk. You don't feel like it was a big risk. If Veganuary or a vegan abolitionist organization did this to FarmKind, found a way to basically, I mean, I really do view this as like a real decimation of Veganuary. Like it is. Nothing could hit Veganuary harder than someone in their own camp starting a campaign that appears to be anti-Veganuary. If that was flipped the other way around, imagine something you've been working on for a long time, like years and years, built from zero, a welfare reform campaign, and it's your baby, and you know what I mean? You've put all your blood, sweat, and tears into it, and then an abolitionist vegan group comes up.
Come on, Veganuary, got to get forgetfarmkind.com going. I honestly think that given how attacked vegans have felt on behalf of Veganuary by this round of coverage, if they made forgetfarmkind.com and did like a donation drive based on this, I think they'd do very well from it. I think they could turn the whole thing, you know, never let a good crisis go to waste. I'm going to have to email someone there and suggest it. Yeah, interesting vegan STEM. Is really going into like the sort of personal and strong feelings of the people involved. Let's say I work for these people IRL. I can be a little bit diplomatic here. Yeah.
That just destroys your reputation. Probably, gets a lot of people to no longer do your thing anymore and go for them. But they justify it the way you did, like, oh, I think we feel the risk was pretty low, and we sort of gave them a heads up, and we've got our strategies and our ideas. How would you feel about it?
We definitely have to watch again the bit where he says the risk's low. By the way, I feel like I was messing with my graphs when there was a big thing there. But okay, how would you feel about if someone did the same to your campaign? Is the thing. I think he's going to say, "Let's come on, forget farmkind.com." I honestly think that he would probably be quite dispassionate about it and say, "Well, that might make sense," right? I don't think that would. Let's see what he says.
Yeah, so I don't think that we are. I guess, like, firstly, I will answer this specific question, but I don't think we're decimating veganuary. I suspect that their numbers of participants will be higher again this year than they were last year, as they have been for the last sort of few years, right?
So.
Yeah, hopefully, right? But like, should people be allowed to criticize us? Like, absolutely. Many people have recently, and they should be allowed to do so.
Criticize, yes. a fully planned out campaign with TV appearances and media. It's not a minor criticism. I mean, it wouldn't feel good, right? It wouldn't feel good. Let's be honest. It would be pretty gutting, actually. I imagine if someone did that to me with my advocacy, I would be devastated if someone went on TV specifically to talk bad on my work. I mean, or an organization I run. I would be absolutely devastated, to be honest.
Yeah. So what was great about the TV is we didn't have to talk about we didn't talk about veganuary at all. We were simply able to go on and say, look, you can help a lot of animals you don't have to go vegan to have a lot of animals. You can, like, factory farming is terrible. We all agree. These are some great ways. We didn't mention veganuary at all in the TV interview.
Cool.
Yeah. So
Piers won't let you get away with that, though. If you go on, he'll make sure you go after them.
But like, to try and like take the question head on, because I think it's a fair question. Yes, if someone like launched a big campaign that was like criticizing the approach of our organization, then yes, I would personally feel like sad about that, and I would feel like it wouldn't feel good. I do think, though, even given that, I think that like and I do care about like what the people at Veganuary, how they feel, and wouldn't do anything that I thought was like just like trying to make them feel bad for the sake of it or anything like that, right? What I do think is that like the most important thing for us in the movement, and I think everyone at Veganuary would agree with this, is not like our personal feelings, but it is the way that the animals feel and what happens to them.
Yeah, that's kind of what you're saying, Stem, right? It's missing the bigger picture. It sucks for those individuals. If it is true that it helps loads more animals, I think with a bit of distance and a bit of wisdom, anyone ought to say, like, I'm allowed to feel crappy about, be made to feel crappy by a campaign, personally, if it's helped lots of animals, in fact. Again, it's a big if. And it is very difficult to feel that way in the short term, right? While you are doing the feeling crappy part. But, yeah, it'll be super interesting to see how the movement looks back on it. I can't help but thinking of the perspective of future historians already, or the futures of movement historians. It'd be interesting to see how this is remembered, or if it is remembered. Tom says in a couple of months, most people will have forgotten about it, which I think is true outside of the movement.
we're all ultimately pushing to do that. And
Mhm.
if somebody thought that the best way to help animals was to come out and with a like Tom Norman sucks campaign, then like honestly, like although I wouldn't be happy about that, I think they should do that.
Right. Okay.
Forget farmkind.com. I'm telling you, did we not invent that here? Like Veganuary can. This is a fantastic donation drive opportunity for them. I'm sure. Listen, it was the first day back after Christmas today, or maybe the Veganuary people have been working through. I'm not sure actually. Probably some of them must have been. But I'm sure that meetings will have been had about how to make the best of this situation, right? I would hope. Forget farmkind.com, right? Well, what do you say? The Tom Norman sucks campaign. No, don't call it that.
Okay. So I have just a couple more questions for you. Again,
I've met Tom a couple of times IRL, by the way. He's a lovely bloke, genuinely.
and we're on the same. Just to reiterate, if anyone's got this far in, to reiterate, this isn't intended to be an interrogation. It's intended to get some answers to some tough questions because, and yeah, you guys came out firing. And I know it doesn't feel that way, but it does to a lot of people. So I think it's important to ask some of these tough questions, even if they might feel a little bit uncomfortable. It might feel like an interrogation. You can get a spotlight on you if you want over there, make it a bit more uncomfortable. Turn the heating up. But it's not.
I'd like to turn the heating up, to be honest. It's a bit nippy.
But again, to reiterate, it's not the intention. As I said, I'll repeat it again. Farmkind, I see it as a tool in the toolbox.
They are taking it very well. You know, this is to do this extended interview where you know you're going to get grilled. To be very honest in all of those responses, and also the changes that they've made to the website, I think, are commendable. You know, this list used to be longer and have some more offensive items on it. The game turns out you could use your mouse the whole time, so easier than I thought. Nah, I really want to see if any of this. This is JJ the Lion's TikTok, huh?
Let's do it, let's do it, let's do it, 'cause I got a feeling.
Okay, full video out soon, it says. 70 eggs omelette challenge, wow. And chips.
So if you're gonna be the best, I'ma tell you.
Christ, are these the other two things from the day when he's also going to eat a goat? Maybe we shouldn't have looked at this, eh?
Not inherently against Farmkind, just this specific campaign. You know, it's controversial. Now, again, you've clarified a lot of things, but I do want to put this out there as with this campaign as it stands, and the way it is put forward. It does appear to have, you said this is a strategy, but it is coming out to people who don't know the strategy, of course. The general public sees this as, okay, Veganuary is bad, don't go vegan, and do this instead. That's the message they receive, whether it's intended that way or not. That's the message they receive. It appears to be like an anti-vegan message, and in place of that, you know, instead donate and we can reform some things because that's good enough, basically, is kind of what they receive. And that might work to get them donations. But I want to talk about the sort of, if the campaigns continue in this light, like this way, and it keeps going that route, I want to talk about sort of the world that could lead to or build, or the sort of society that could build. Now, if we have three options here, I suppose I would say, and again, this is not really a question, it's more of a statement or like an idea, and you please give me how you react to it, however you feel. So there's one world where people accept not veganism necessarily, but vegan ideals, right? Like the ideas that vegans put forward, like, hey, let's not exploit and kill animals if we don't have to, right? We're not all in survival mode. Animals are thinking, feeling, conscious. This is not an opinion. They're conscious, they're sentient, they think, they feel. That's fact. But the opinion is, so we shouldn't do these things to them, especially when we don't have to. And that's the opinion. And people start to get on board with that. And imagine 50 years from now, the world would look a lot like a very, very, very good place. We can agree on that. In World 2, they don't only do that, they actually also donate to the organization like Farmkind. that would be an even better world. I think we can agree. If people change their mindset, change the way they consume, and do that, then it's an even better world. But option 3 for me feels quite dystopian. Like if we take your campaign at face value and we take it to its logical conclusion, we end up with a pretty, I would say, not a very nice world. We end up with a world where the wealthy can just simply, quote, offset all the bad things they're doing to animals. And the more wealthy you are, the more you can consume and the more you can offset. And the less wealthy you are, if you're poor, you literally can't offset. But also you're being told, don't change your consumer habits. So the poor literally just continue doing whatever they were doing before and don't change. And I think, as we both know,
Well, I think, but if you get enough donations to these charities that Farmkind's supporting, the poor will have very high quality alternative proteins that are cheaper than the very expensive animal products via this extremely scientific depiction. So, and I mean, the point about the wealthy, my friend said this when I brought out, oh, so can rich people just offset more and be, more, whatever, more holy? Yes, frankly, yes, you bloody can. All right. If you're a multimillionaire and you want to give some of that cheddar to the animal charities, that's a non-vegan phrase. Yeah, you bloody well can. And if you're in a position to work harder to earn more or to invest, to have more to give, whatever it may be, and you do choose to do that so that you can create more value and give more of it to help more animals, then bloody yes, you get the credit for that. So I mean, I don't know what else to say about that, right? It's the same for any charitable cause. Of course, the more that you have, the more that you have to give, the more impact that you can make. It's really it's the same for anything. I think this well, it only counts for rich people kind of argument you could use to argue against so much stuff. Like, it's not an argument against Ferraris existing that only rich people can afford them. Some things rich people could, right, pretty much everything, in fact, rich people could afford to do more of it than poor people. C'est la vie, right? I don't think that's an argument against an approach, in my view. But the main response there is that, and this is what Tom's going to say, if a lot of people do donate, and especially a lot of rich people donate a lot of money, then it's going to result in a world where the poor are not going to be consuming animal products in any case because they have such good alternatives. And the animal products are increasingly expensive, and so why would they do that?
Quote, poor people make up the vast majority of the world population, right? So the vast majority of the world population doesn't change. The elites and the people with money don't change the way they see animals. The same number of animals or more continue.
Of course, the other part of this is, like, in the sort of 3 worlds that he's describing, some of them are interesting, Stem. I'd like to hear your view on that. There's no consideration to either, like, how likely it is to achieve either of those, or any of those 3 worlds, or how many people would realistically be doing the good thing in any case. Obviously, we want people to go vegan and to donate, but then we're back to this graph, which is I'm finding increasingly useful. We've got these people willing to go vegan, these people willing to donate, these people willing to do both, but at the moment we're trying to just communicate here.
Continue to be bred into captivity, and people just offset it by trying to improve the conditions, and that's world 3. So yeah, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I guess to like address the kind of economic inequality piece first, because I think it's a really interesting and important point. So if we think globally, because you said, like, we know most people are globally are poor. This is certainly the case.
I would really love to see come out of this some of these sort of like obnoxiously rich Instagram people, like who's that guy, Dan Bilzerian, or like your Jake Pauls and people like this. If one of those sort of heel guys, right, to use a wrestling term, would, you know, totally own the vegans by donating $1 million and say, have offset, you know, more animals than you could ever not eat. I just want to say, as a vegan, I would be so owned if, you know, Dan Bilzerian would drop $1 million on FarmKind. I think all vegans in the chat are going to concur, right? We would be so owned if anybody did that.
One of the reasons that meat eating was on the rise is because people globally are getting wealthier, which is one of the like kind of troubling things, I think, for us as animal advocates. Is we clearly want people to be doing better and like being able to like afford like higher status foods, like unfortunately like meat, because this is a good sign ultimately that like human lives are improving around the world, which is really important. But it has this cost, which is that.
Yeah, that's it, Stem. Like some of these like right-wing rich arsehole types, do you know what I mean? That would be the ideal, like get Andrew Tate to donate, do you know what I mean? That'd be like, sure, we'll take his money, right? If there could be like a trend set of owning the vegans by donating, that you're going to get a ton of like value for animals out of people who would never have given it otherwise. There's another angle to that. I'm going to write down Forget FarmKind as well. I'll write an email about that later. Does it already exist? That'd be good. Obviously not. Obviously it doesn't.
Like is also mean that people eat more meat. So like a lot of like the world's poorest are sort of, if you like, accidentally vegan or like vegan-ish because they simply cannot afford to eat animal products. So if we're talking just about like kind of the developed world and countries in sort of like, you know, the UK, US, you know, Western Europe, this kind of thing. The amount to offset that we calculate with the charities that we recommend is as I say, it's $23 a month, which is like an amount that like I think a large number, not everybody, but a large number of people in these societies can afford like that amount of additional money. So I think that like that, I guess I think that context is like quite important. It's not like this is a kind of like hyper luxury good to be able to sort of make yourself feel better by paying money or anything like this. This is like, because we can change the lives of animals for really small amounts of money, like less than $1 to free a chicken from a cage. This is actually something that I think is like affordable for like a very large number of people in Western societies. And really like we are the problem, right? Like we're consuming the vast majority of the animal products. We're consuming, even though factory farming is growing in like Asia and places like this. In South America, it's still fundamentally us. We, you know, especially in Europe and in the US, we are just eating vastly more meat per person than like anybody else. We are the driving force still behind the problem of factory farming.
And just to briefly interrupt, that was kind of I agree, and that was sort of the point I was making, that the current iteration of your campaigning almost encourages that plus more. With the, you know, the eating competitions and the don't listen to vegans, don't do veganuary, it almost says continue consuming like that, just try to offset, which for a lot of people will be a moral license to consume more. Like if you told me that all I had to do was offset my flying, I would fly more. It's very simple, because I wouldn't think not flying, if you told me don't.
I really want to see like a clear bullet point on that. Yeah, and that would be good. Like, if you were really going to increase your meat consumption and increase your donations, if the donations having more impact than the meat consumption, then that would be a net good. These empirical points are going to be quite pivotal. It's going to be important to show that that is the case. Yeah, exactly, Stem. yeah, if they were in fact doing the offsetting as he's describing it, hopefully Tom says this.
Oh, you don't need to not fly. Don't listen to the people who tell you not to fly. We know what we're talking about. Just donate. Not flying has a limit. I would just fly more. So that's why I gave in that future world, it's the same or more animals, not less, in that third world, and that third world I put forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think there is just a limit on the amount of food of animal products that most people want to eat, and I think it is also the case that
Here is, by the way, speaking about high income countries eating more meat. This is population and then total meat consumption by income level. So the high income countries, or the higher and upper middle income countries, about 49% of the population, and eating, what's that, 77% of the meat. So yeah, absolutely, it is largely a high income country phenomenon.
many people are already there is just a limit on the amount of food of animal products that most people want to eat, and I think it is also the case that many people
Now for JJ the Lion
are already eating meat, or at least some kind of animal product with every meal of the day already. So I would slightly question how much more meat, even if people felt that somehow they've been given a license to behave in a way that they weren't otherwise going to behave, how much more meat they would eat. I just think that's probably not going to be that much.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point, honestly. I think it's probably the same for flying, honestly, right? I doubt that the opportunity to offset has, or increases your likelihood of taking flights. I mean, maybe marginally, but yeah, I've always thought this when people say that this is how they'd react to people saying, I'm just going to go vegan. Well, I'm just going to eat more meat. It's like, are you actually? Presumably you're eating as much meat as you want to eat. You're going to eat more meat than you want to eat. Right? Why would you do this?
I also think that again, our campaign is really I think our campaign is saying
I suppose the idea is they may have had some level of restraint because they vaguely had the idea that it would be good to go vegan, and now they're liberated of that idea by this campaign that they might just let loose. But yeah, I clearly there are some people who are flexitarian, and it's possible that some people on that spectrum would take it as a license to eat more meat. Actually, I have a really interesting moral. Let me look at the moral licensing thing that I was going to show earlier. Yeah, here it is. So this is a study we published in 2022 that I published with a student of mine at Bath. In 2 studies, participants were assigned to a treatment condition in which they had the opportunity to sign a petition to restrict meat in public sector catering, or a control condition where they did not see the petition. All participants then indicated whether they would personally pledge a meat-free week. We compared personal pledge rates between petition signers, non-signers, and the control group. So this is sort of testing the idea of moral licensing. So people get the opportunity to sign the petition first, and then if they sign the petition, maybe they have a moral licensing effect, they're less likely to pledge the meat-free week, right? In study 1, we found that petition signers were significantly more likely than the non-signers to pledge a meat-free week, but were not significantly different from the control group. So the signers and the non-signers, we've figured that they're kind of self-sorting into, generally in favour of meat reduction versus generally against meat reduction, or let's just say not in favour of meat reduction if they didn't sign the petition. And then subsequently they're less likely to pledge the meat-free week, but that's just consistent with their attitudes from before. And interestingly, not significantly different from the control group. So the people who didn't see the petition at all, the people who signed the petition were no different from the control group in terms of meat-free pledging, even though they had sort of already sorted themselves as the more pro meat-free people. Then we did a second study where we've kind of realised that we've got the selection effect going on, so we give control for that. In study 2, we added measures of meat attachment and environmental attitudes as covariates. We found that in a model without covariates, petition signing significantly predicted non-pledging. Petition non-signing significantly predicted non-pledging. So for those people who saw the petition and refused to sign, then they were less likely to pledge a meat-free week. In a model with covariates, meat attachment significantly predicted pledging likelihood, but petition non-signing remained a significant predictor of pledging. That must be, of non-pledging, right? These results show no moral licensing effect. In fact, we observe consistency between petition signing and pledge taking, though it's likely attributable to stable underlying attitudes rather than a consistency effect per se. Animal advocates should target advocacy requestables, those who are more likely to have positive underlying attitudes, and avoid those who are likely to refuse. So there's like experimental evidence of this moral licensing effect. Now, like I said, it's not completely analogous because in the case of FarmKind, it is more explicitly posed as a moral licensing thing, right? They are actually saying, we didn't say in our experiment, by the way, if you sign the petition, there's no need to reduce your own meat consumption. But yes, we did not find evidence of a moral licensing effect such that people who had signed a petition were less likely to then take personal action. I think the disanalogy in terms of how explicit the moral licensing is in this case might be too much for that to overcome, but I couldn't resist because I knew I had done a study that was somewhat related. Hey, Oggy, I don't like the moral inconsistency of eating meat and donating. I think he needs to emphasize that it still isn't justifiable. Well, I agree with you, but it is not his job to say that currently. I think that they're deliberately not being very forthcoming in saying, I am vegan. And, we heard Tom kind of affirm it but not say it explicitly here, and we heard Tony kind of affirm it but not explicitly say it in the GB News interview. I think that part of the strategy here, they really don't want people engaging with their campaign to think they're being told to go vegan, and so they can't really have all of the people for the campaign out there being banging the drum of veganism, because it's the whole idea is that they're going to go for this group in red and not this group in purple. So I think on a personal level, he does probably think people should be vegan and so on, but he's not going to say it here. Well, I guess he has said that here to some extent, right? But he's not going to have that as his main message.
To people who, again, weren't very predisposed to the vegan message, there is something else you can do because don't you agree that factory farming is terrible? So I don't think that but to go back to your kind of scenario thing, because I appreciate we're trying to move on to this thing, and I think it's a good question. Again, I think it comes down to where are we right now, and then what does the role of FarmKind in our work play? I think what we play is a stepping stone. So the solution to ending factory farming ultimately in the very end of that is not going to be cage-free campaigns in themselves. What cage-free campaigns do is they get chickens out of cages. It's really, really important, and it's a step, I think, to a factory farming free world, because it makes the lives of those animals better, and it increases these kinds of campaigns increase the costs of these products, which makes things like
That's another thing which the animal movement sometimes wants to say a little bit quietly, because people will like the idea of better animal welfare conditions and they'll vote for that and they'll say that that's a good thing. We don't need to be saying too loudly this is going to make animal products much more expensive. I kind of explain that and go into that sometimes on the channel, because I want that to land for vegans and for us to understand that we should be in favor of welfare campaigns, because they do, they are likely to shift demand in the long term. But that's not what we're going to put on posters for improving welfare, right?
Alternatives more cost competitive, which is really important, because I think that that's probably how we're going to get to a factory farming free world is by identifying alternative products that people are prepared to eat instead. So products that like taste the same, are as cheap, are as available, things like probably like cultivated meat, and things like alternative proteins. I think that's probably the way that we like solve this problem ultimately. And to do that, money is going to be a massively important part. Obviously, like our donations are not on their own going to like be enough to like create cultivated meat, but what they do is they support organizations to go out and like unlock private finance, to unlock government money, and that's really what is going to like create the viability of the kind of the alternative protein sector.
Okay. Yep. Fair enough. I agree with you, by the way, on the lab meat side of things. I think that ultimately will do more. That'll change more things than any of us and our advocacy could ever do, unless your advocacy is lab meat advocacy, then obviously you are doing it. And I think if people can get past.
Even then, I'm a big believer there's got to be a push and a pull. And, you know, a lot of the protein side of things will say that they don't want to be super explicit with, you know, graphic animal imagery or whatever, but they're going to totally understand that that probably benefits them if someone is being explicit with that graphic imagery. Right now, it's not their role, and they want to have their brand, you know, distance from it. But the people doing animal advocacy are certainly helping that transition along, for sure.
That's the ick factor there. If we could just get past the the meat industry propaganda, the ones that won't let go, if they just get on board with it and realize there was a bunch of money to be made out of this, and it's, you know, I understand there's systems in place and there's infrastructure and stuff, but, you know, can you imagine a meat company? They've got all these animals and all this blood and all this guts and all these diseases and all these things, antibiotics and all the things they have to take care of, and instead they could just have a nice clean factory that makes the same product. I mean, I know there are stumbling blocks, and I know there's like, you know, history and things, the conservative mindset of like, I don't want to give up my tradition and stuff, but bloody hell, I mean, at some point, some you know, when the new generations come through, some of them are going to start to realize, well, wait, we're missing a trick here. This is so much better. Eventually it'll be cost effective too. So yeah, I can see that future coming as well. I have one more question for you before we get to it. Can you tell us where can people go then if they want to find out more about FarmKind and the actual message behind the behind what's in the media? Where can they find that?
Yeah, thank you. So our website is farmkind.giving. So you can find out all about us there. You can find out about the charities that we recommend. If you don't like us because of this campaign, I understand. What I would say is, one thing I want to say really clearly is we didn't consult the charities that we recommend before we did this campaign. They don't endorse this campaign.
Well, there's Wasp Cake Energy over here. They've really dived on the grenade and are soaking up the shit that is coming their way with grace.
If you find out about them and think they're still great, but you really don't like us, I would suggest that you go to their website and donate to them, and don't tell them you found out about it through FarmKind, because they're still great, even if you think we suck. So.
Fair enough. And I'll add to that as well. If you really, really don't like FarmKind or any of those charities, but you do want to donate some money, then please consider donating to Veganuary. I believe they have a uncapped matching donations. So if you, I believe, I think this is true, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe if anything you donate gets matched no matter how much you donate. And that's ridiculous. If someone wants to donate like $100,000, it would just turn into $200,000, which is absolutely phenomenal. And if not Veganuary, of course, there are great groups out there. I love We the Free. I think We the Free are a fantastic advocacy group. They have great trainings for activists and all that sort of stuff, and do great work on the streets. So yeah, please consider donating to somebody. Your money goes a long way. Okay, my last question for you, Tom, is based on the work you're doing. It's linked with our last question actually before. Based on the work that you're doing, where do you actually place us in terms of the future for animals, like good, bad, ugly? And I asked you I gave you 3 examples of worlds in 50 years. Okay, where do you actually think we're going to be in 50 years?
Yeah, so I think fundamentally, I don't know, but that's a really boring answer. So
Yeah, we'll finish that. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Tom.
So I think there are some reasons to be really optimistic and to have some hope. So one of those I think is cultivated meat and these alternatives. Like we are seeing these as like, that sector has some difficulties. It kind of had a bit of a kind of wave, and then but like often with technologies, you have this kind of period of like excitement, and then there's kind of like a dip where actually a lot of the real work gets done, and then you see the kind of explosion at the end. I think it's not a dead cert, but I think it's still a really exciting area and gives us an opportunity to say to people, you don't have to like give up things. You can just have this thing that's basically the same product as the ones that you like, but it's way better for the environment. It's so much better for animals, and also doesn't have all kinds of the other kind of social justice and human problems that come along with factory farming. I think that AI is going to be a really interesting thing for animals. There is a lot of really kind of potentially very negative and scary things about it, but there's also some real opportunities, for example, in cultivated meat breakthroughs, but also in things like being able to identify diseases in like animals in farms earlier, so that we can that farms can like address this and like make sure that those animals don't die. So improving the lives of like AI could improve the lives of animals as well as make them worse. So I think there's some real hope in these things. And also like the charities that we recommend and we support, and other amazing charities doing great work, they are like scoring wins for animals like every month, every year, right? And that is really exciting. And although the problem is it's a really big mountain to climb, the reality is that we are finding things that work. We are making the lives of animals better. Like if you look at in the UK, the animal welfare strategy, I think is genuinely got some really exciting things. If it happens, and I think that's an if, but if it does happen, that will be one of the biggest transformations for animals in the UK's history. The EU has just finished a consultation on cage-free bans. If they did that, that would be the biggest transformation in animal welfare in animals' lives in like the history since we invented factory farming. So there's some really exciting stuff out there. There are a lot of problems, and there are a lot of things that we're all working day in, day out to try and address. And that's why I say, again, I am very personally, I want other people to be like disagreeing with us and trying other strategies, because we definitely could be wrong. And this is a big challenge that's going to require a lot of different strategies. And like you say, lots of different tools in the toolbox. But I think that like we have a real shot, I think, actually, of like in 50 years being in one of those positive worlds.
Damn, nice. I want to. It was a good interview, by the way, and nice. Yeah, I think Tom did a good job here. Well answered for the most part. I felt like it was all honest and good engagement, and yeah, for the most part, kind of what I expected to hear. I want to hear the bit again where he says that there's relatively low risk from this strategy. I think his point was there anything more to that than just that the news moves fast and probably no one will remember this in a couple of months.
Organizations, we've gone from about 50% of hens living in cages in about sort of 10 years ago. Animals welfare. The reason animals are treated like shit in factory farms is because it's cheap.
From you, because you've got your strategy and you've got what you believe, which is not that.
Give it up. I would expect that like that would cause more animals to be farmed, right? Which would be a bad thing. The reason that the specific reason that we're saying like, why don't you do this instead, is because number one, we think that, as I say, like the people who we're targeting, we don't think that they were going to go vegan otherwise, right? But number two, our experience so far has been that like often when we start talking about factory farming, people are.
I don't really able to find the bit where it says there's low risk. I think, was there anything more to that than just the news is going to move on and this is kind of one thing of many? I should look to the timestamp when he said it. I think I've Nah, I'm not going to find it now, eh? Oh well. Well, this was a good discussion. I'm glad that I got to finish watching this. I'll do have to build this out a little bit more, which I shall do before the debate tomorrow. Debate tomorrow at 7:30, and talk to Ask Yourself afterwards at 9. That was it, really? Yeah, okay, that's fine then. I'm wondering whether to build this out anymore now. I think I'll do this tomorrow. But good, that I enjoyed that conversation. We'll do a little bit of Fast Action Network, and then I'll shut it down. I enjoyed that conversation. I feel well briefed for tomorrow. And I know that Patrick is a good debater, so I have to put in a little bit of work to make sure I'm getting everything right there. I'll tell you as well, you know, Tom says we could be wrong and he could change his mind and so on. I'm definitely in that camp. I think this is not like a situation where I'm determined to beat the other guy in the debate. This is a situation where, genuinely, if I'm wrong, I don't want to be wrong for any longer than I need to be. Like I say, I think that kind of history will... Yeah, I agree, Stem. If it works, it's a genius idea. I agree. I think that history will kind of show one way or the other, hey. But I also hope that Tom's right, that the downsides are not as severe as many people appear to be imagining at this junction. Or the risks are lower. This is action.thehumaneleague.org, as many of you know, I'm sure. We're rounding out with a bit of Fast Action Network, and then I'll bid you good night shortly after that. Those LinkedIn notifications look tasty. I might have to have a go on them. Did I just do this one? That looks similar. Go on then, what's the discourse? Hey, this is what we posted for Veganuary 2.0 today. Any Veganuary 2.0 partakers? Not doing too badly. There's a little bit of Veganuary hype. But okay, we got distracted. Let's go. I'll go until 280 points. Can anyone mog my THL score, by the way? I've got 274 points on the Fast Action Network. Anyone beating that? Hey, Oppenheimer. Hell yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I hear that. I made a short talking about this with Ask Yourself, and he is of a similar opinion that the most important thing is to not be the one doing the bad thing, or that's a very I don't know if he would sign off on exactly that wording, but that it's very important to not be the one doing the bad thing, and that there's much more weight on that than kind of offsetting harm done by others. I think that's a legitimate position. It's not where my moral intuition is. I was speaking earlier about it's doing the non-tagging thing. That's annoying. Yeah, there's not my moral intuitions, but you know, I can see that is important for some people, surely. Our security settings have blocked your IP address. Well, what country? Interesting. Well, I guess not done for that one then. All right, last one. And then I'm calling it. 280. Nice. We're gonna get to 300 this month. No one mugging my score, I think. Right, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm glad that we got to go through this. Looking forward to tomorrow. We've got the debate at 7:30, and we got Ask Yourself at 9, so it's going to be a nice stream tomorrow evening. We'll look forward to seeing you guys there. Thanks again for watching. Have a nice rest of your evening. And I'll catch you guys tomorrow. Cheers.